Hi, I'm John from Oxidation Technologies, and I'd like to talk to you today about oxygen concentrators and how they make oxygen. Now, I put makes in quotation marks because we're really not making oxygen, but we're taking air and removing the nitrogen and concentrating the oxygen that's already in the air. Got a picture here of three different types of concentrators: smaller, a little bit bigger, and we have larger industrial type concentrators. They all work the same, and I want to explain a little bit what's going on inside of these. So at the heart of it is what we call molecular sieve, and got a picture here. You might be familiar with a sieve that you could use to sift out sand. You put some sand with different size rocks in it, you shake it, and you get the fine sand out of it. Molecular sieve is defined as a crystalline structure that attracts certain molecular shapes. So this is really tiny things, the size of molecules. And this is my model of this crystalline structure that attracts these particles, and these are the particles that are being sifted. We've got water, water vapor molecule. It's highly attracted to molecular sieve. We've got nitrogen molecules. They're attracted to this molecular sieve under pressure. And then we've got our oxygen molecules. They're not attracted at all to the sieve. Just one thing here with the pronunciation of sieve. I know some people, they pronounce it sieve, but if you look it up, sieve is the standard way to pronounce it, even if it seems inconsistent with some other words. That's the way it is with the English language, lots of inconsistencies. So we're going to go with sieve. So here's our model of molecular sieve. And one of the principles is this molecular sieve, it loves water vapor. Any available water vapor is adsorbed, and that's another pronunciation. It's not with a B. Adsorbed because it's stuck to the surface. It's absorbed into the zeolite and it releases heat. So this little red has that water vapor is stuck to this molecular sieve. It releases heat. You can get one in there with some extra pressure. You can get two of these indicators of water vapor. Once this sieve is deactivated with water vapor, the zeolite can absorb some more water vapor, but it has to be under pressure and it can't absorb any nitrogen. So water, we say it deactivates. In a sense, it ruins the sieve, but it still can function as to remove moisture. But the activated sieve is clean. There's no water vapor stuck into it. A nitrogen molecule can stick to these sites under some pressure. So we say that molecular sieve, it likes nitrogen, it loves water vapor. So the nitrogen molecules are adsorbed, they're locked into the zeolite when they're under some pressure. Here's a picture of what the molecular sieve looks like. Now these are formed into little BBs. You'd have to look at it under a microscope or even an electron microscope to actually see the tiny little structures inside there. But this is the material that we're dealing with. Okay, so now I'm taking some of that molecular sieve and I'm putting it into a sealed container to protect it from any of the gases, any moisture outside. We call this the sieve bed. And this is a component in these oxygen concentrators. Another component here is an air compressor, just representing a mixture of these molecules that form air into this air compressor. Right now we're not putting any pressure, nothing's turned on yet, but we've got a compressor and a sieve bed. So now we turn our compressor on and it begins to push this air into the sieve bed. And as that air gets pushed into the sieve bed, the first thing that gets stuck are these water vapor molecules. And they collect right there at the entrance where this air is being pushed in. The nitrogen moves on a little bit further, and as it builds pressure, they begin to lock into this sieve material. The oxygen molecules continue all the way through and come out the other end. So now I'm representing, we've got about 30 psi of pressure pushing in here. By the time it gets through, maybe we're up to 10 psi in the sieve bed. This is what these components look like in real life. An oilless compressor, two different examples of these sieve beds. Two individual sieve beds. This is where your oxygen is being collected. This here's a timing mechanism. We'll talk about that. Same with this one. We've got two different sieve beds. This oxygen receiver tank is right there in the middle. Putting it all together, if you open up an oxygen concentrator, we see the compressor. Compressed air pushes up. This here is cooling it down. We're trying to remove some of the moisture. We cool it down, the moisture condenses into this little tank here, and comes out in a wick so that moisture is removed. Dried air comes out of this little bluish tube fed into the oxygen concentrator. And we'll talk about the inner workings here. The oxygen coming out is coming out of this white tube. Okay, so we're back to the model again. So as this sieve bed fills with air, you see we're getting more and more as this compressor is working, continues to push more air into it. This bottom area collects the moisture, the water vapor, nitrogen continues on through, it gets stuck as the pressure builds, more and more oxygen flows through and is collected in this receiver tank. We can say that these nitrogen bonds, they're more weakly connected to the sieve, but under some pressure, it makes them stick. So eventually, this sieve material is saturated. We can see that it's collected all the water vapor it can over here. The rest of the sieve is packed with the nitrogen molecules. What's left of the oxygen has passed through. If we would continue like this, you would end up getting some nitrogen molecules that can't find a home here anymore to stick, and you get nitrogen mixed in with your oxygen, so your purity would decline. So now once this is full, we open a valve at the end. This was under pressure, and now all these nitrogen molecules, you can think of them like they're stuck in their little spring. They release. This pressure forces all the nitrogen out, and along with it, it carries these more weakly bonded water vapor molecules. So at first, in the last slide, they were, two of them shoved into every little space, but this nitrogen rushing out removes a lot of it. So this is getting rid of some of this moisture, and you're left with this zeolite that still has some water vapor stuck to it, but it can serve to absorb some of that water vapor in the next cycle. So we call this exhausting, blowing out the nitrogen water vapor. Our oxygen is stored here in the receiver tank. So now we've got two of these sieve beds. And the beauty of having two sieve beds is when one is filling and we're ready to exhaust it, as this is exhausting, we can be filling the next one. So it's a continuous cycle. We don't have to start and stop. It would be like having your sieve with the sand, like a continuous operation. You'd have two of them going, so as that sand is pouring in, you can switch from one to the other. So as this one is exhausting this nitrogen and water vapor, the other one is filling back up again. And now we tie the two ends together so that oxygen can collect into our receiver tank. And we've also put a couple of valves here. We've got some check valves so that the oxygen can flow this way, but it's not going to come back. We also have something called an EQ valve. I'll talk about that in the next slide. When we open that, that's going to allow some oxygen from one to the other. So in this diagram, the red indicates valves that are open. So now I've got a feed valve and an exhaust valve on each of these. I've got these two check valves and I've got an EQ valve. So this one now is fully saturated. This one is exhausting, so the pressure is down to close to zero. This one's under pressure, all the nitrogen is stuck to the sieve material. So in this cycle now, we've all these valves, well, this valve is still open yet, this is nearly full, and now I've got the EQ valve. So what's happening here, as this one is just about full, and this one has completely emptied, we want to get a head start to build a little pressure in here so that when the next batch of air comes in, the nitrogen can stick to the zeolite. So we open a little valve here and let some of the oxygen flow in. Now the oxygen isn't going to stick to any of the zeolite, so it's going to quickly build some pressure. We don't want too much in there, we don't want oxygen flowing out, but we give it just a little bit to build some pressure. So once we've got some pressure built up, then we open up this feed valve and start letting more air in. And in the process, this exhaust valve has opened, so it's releasing the nitrogen, bringing out the water vapor as well. And we notice here that we end up with this zone at the inlet of these sieve beds that we call the water zone. It's the area of deactivated zeolite. It doesn't absorb nitrogen anymore, but it does act as a desiccant to remove the water vapor. And at this point, this continuous cycling between these, we've got two feed valves, two exhaust valves, this EQ valve and check valves. When they all work together, we can get up to typically 93%. I think 95.5 is the theoretical maximum purity of oxygen because you're just removing the nitrogen. There's a few other molecules of gas in air as well that get mixed in with the oxygen. So come back to this sieve. This is just another diagram of a sieve. Sieve's been used a long time, and I turn this on its side. You really have the same principles here. We've got a compressor, somebody doing the work, pushing this air in. Here's your compressor. He's lifting this material, putting rocks and sand into the sieve. Sieve beds here, and the oxygen falling through the bottom, the smallest parts. This would represent the oxygen. So it's a very effective method for removing the nitrogen and allowing you to be left with just nearly pure oxygen. And back again to an actual concentrator that has all the parts. The bigger concentrators, all these components separated out, but here's that compressor again. Cools the air down a little bit to remove some of that water. Water is an enemy of a sieve. We try to get it as dry as possible. If we have too much water, that water zone is going to increase, and eventually it's going to ruin your sieve. So we get rid of as much water as we can. We've got the air flowing in. This here is the timer. It's cycling back and forth. Here are two, the feed valve and the exhaust valve. They're actually built into one of this particular unit. And there's the check valves are built also into here. But the oxygen flows then out of the concentrator. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to check our website. We've got lots of information on this as well as the equipment that uses oxygen. Thank you.